Captain Lisa Warren stood on the bridge of the UES Thunderhawk and watched the stars through the main viewing screen as her ship moved through the dark space between worlds. The crew around her worked in silence because they knew better than to make unnecessary noise when she was thinking. Lisa had earned her reputation as the most feared captain in the Terran fleet, and she wore that fear like armor around her heart. The communications officer turned toward her with careful movements. Lieutenant Murphy had served under Lisa for 2 years, and he still jumped when she looked at him directly. He cleared his throat before speaking in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "Captain, we have received new orders from Fleet Command." Lisa turned her cold blue eyes toward him and waited for him to continue. She never asked questions when a simple stare would get her the information she needed. Murphy's hands shook slightly as he handed her the datapad containing their new mission details. Lisa read the orders without showing any emotion on her face. The Galactic Council had requested human assistance with a problem in the frontier zone again. 3 alien trading vessels had gone missing near the edge of known space, and the other species were too afraid to investigate. They wanted humans to do their dirty work as usual because humans were the only species crazy enough to fight things that could kill them. "Set course for the Kepler Station sector," Lisa said in her flat voice that cut through the bridge like a blade. "Maximum speed." The navigator's fingers flew over his controls as he input the new coordinates. Within minutes, the Thunderhawk's powerful engines pushed the ship toward their destination at speeds that would have terrified the crews of other species. Humans had always been willing to take risks that others considered suicidal. Lisa walked to her captain's chair and sat down with the rigid posture that had become her trademark. She remembered the day she had first taken command of this ship 5 years ago. The previous captain had been killed in a battle with Zephyrian raiders, and Lisa had been the only officer brave enough or stupid enough to accept the position. The Thunderhawk had a reputation for being cursed because it attracted the most dangerous missions in the fleet. The other captains called her the Iron Maiden behind her back. They said she had ice water in her veins instead of blood, and that she cared more about her ship than the people who served on it. Lisa had heard the whispers, and she did nothing to discourage them. Fear was a useful tool, and she had learned long ago that showing weakness would get her killed. Her childhood on New Dakota had taught her that lesson in the hardest way possible. The mining colony had been on the edge of human space where alien raiders came to steal supplies and take prisoners. Lisa's parents had run the colony's defense systems, and they had died protecting their home when she was 12 years old. She had hidden in the emergency bunkers for 3 months, eating emergency rations and drinking recycled water until a rescue ship finally arrived. The military had become her new family after that, but it was a family built on discipline and duty rather than love and warmth. Lisa had risen through the ranks by being the officer who never hesitated to take the dangerous assignments that other people refused. She had learned to bury her emotions so deep that sometimes she wondered if they still existed at all. The bridge alarm suddenly broke the silence, and Lieutenant Chen at the sensor station called out contact readings. "Captain, we have multiple ships approaching from the port side. Configuration unknown, but they are moving fast." Lisa stood up from her chair and moved to the tactical display without rushing. Panic was a luxury she could not afford, and her crew needed to see that their captain was always in control. The display showed 6 ships moving toward them in a formation that suggested military training. "Are they responding to our hail?" Lisa asked. "Negative, Captain. They are maintaining radio silence and their weapons are powered up." Lisa smiled for the first time in weeks, but it was not a smile that showed happiness. It was the smile of a predator who had found worthy prey. "Red alert! All hands to battle stations. Raise shields and prepare to engage." The Thunderhawk transformed from a peaceful exploration vessel into a weapon of war in less than 30 seconds. Lisa had trained her crew well, and they moved with the precision of a machine. The ship's weapons came online, and the shields formed a protective barrier around them as they prepared for battle. "Captain, the unknown ships are opening fire." Chen reported as the first energy blast struck their shields. "Return fire. Target their lead ship," Lisa ordered. The Thunderhawk's main guns spoke with voices of thunder and lightning as they sent death toward their attackers. Lisa watched the tactical display with calm eyes as the battle unfolded around them. She had fought in hundreds of battles over the years, and each one had made her harder and colder than the last. The enemy ships were fast and well armed, but they lacked the desperate creativity that made human fighters so dangerous. Lisa ordered a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible for the pilots of other species to execute. The Thunderhawk twisted and spun through space like a dancer while its guns never stopped firing. Within 20 minutes, 4 of the enemy ships had been destroyed and the remaining 2 were retreating toward the edge of the system. Lisa's crew cheered their victory, but she felt nothing except the cold satisfaction of a job well done. Victory was her drug and battle was her addiction, but neither one filled the empty space inside her heart. "Damage report," she said when the cheering had died down. "Minor hull damage on Deck 7. No casualties." Chief Engineer Martinez reported from his station. Lisa nodded and returned to her chair. Another battle won, and another day survived in the endless war between humanity and the hostile universe that surrounded them. She knew that tomorrow would bring new dangers and new enemies, but she also knew that she would face them with the same cold courage that had kept her alive this long. The stars continued to shine outside the viewing screen, but Lisa no longer saw their beauty. She saw only the darkness between them and the threats that might be hiding in that darkness. She was the Iron Maiden of the stars, and she would continue to fight until the day she died because fighting was the only thing she knew how to do anymore. 3 days after the battle, Lisa's ship approached the coordinates, where the missing trading vessels had last been seen. The Thunderhawk moved through space like a hunting wolf searching for signs of its prey. Lisa stood at the center of the bridge and watched the sensor readings with eyes that missed nothing. The space around them seemed empty at first, but Lisa had learned not to trust appearances. She had survived this long by assuming that every empty sector of space might be hiding something that wanted to kill her and her crew. The sensors swept back and forth in wide arcs looking for any trace of the missing ships. "Captain, I am picking up a faint distress signal," Communications Officer Murphy said as he adjusted his equipment to get a clearer reading. "It appears to be coming from bearing 27 Mark IV. Lisa moved to his station and listened to the weak signal that was barely strong enough to reach them. The transmission was in standard human language, but it was mixed with static and interference that made it hard to understand. Someone was calling for help, but they were either very far away or their equipment was badly damaged. "Can you clean up that signal?" Lisa asked. Murphy worked at his controls for several minutes before the message became clear enough to understand. The voice belonged to a human male, and he was requesting immediate assistance from any Terran vessel in the area. Lisa felt something stir in her chest that might have been concern, but she pushed it down before it could show on her face. "Set course for the source of that transmission," she ordered. "But approach with caution. This could be a trap." The Thunderhawk changed direction and moved toward the coordinates of the distress signal. As they got closer, the sensors began to pick up the outline of a damaged ship, floating dead in space. The vessel was clearly of alien design, but it showed signs of recent battle damage, and its power systems appeared to be completely offline. "Life signs?" Lisa asked as they moved closer to the derelict ship. "Confirmed, Captain." "I am reading one human life form aboard that vessel," Chen reported from the sensor station. "Life signs are weak but stable." Lisa studied the alien ship through the main viewer and tried to identify its origin. The design was definitely Zephyrian, which meant this was probably one of their scout vessels. The Zephyrians were one of the most aggressive species in known space, and they had been at war with humanity for over 20 years. Finding a human aboard one of their ships raised questions that Lisa did not like. "Prepare an away team," she ordered. "Full combat gear and life support equipment. I want to know what that human is doing on a Zephyrian vessel." Lieutenant Commander Stevens gathered a team of 6 Marines and prepared for boarding operations. Lisa considered leading the team herself, but decided that the bridge was where she needed to be in case this turned out to be an ambush. She watched through the helmet cameras as her people moved through the airlocks and into the alien ship. The interior of the Zephyrian vessel was dark and filled with the smell of burned electronics. The Marines moved carefully through the corridors with their weapons ready and their sensors scanning for any signs of life. The ship appeared to be completely abandoned except for the single human life form that their sensors had detected. They found him in what had once been the ship's holding area. Jake Running Bear sat against the wall of a damaged cell with his eyes closed and his breathing slow and steady. He wore the torn remains of a Terran fleet uniform, and his skin showed the marks of recent injuries, but his face was calm and peaceful despite his situation. "Sir, we have found the survivor," Stevens reported over the communication link. "He appears to be conscious but weak." Lisa watched through the camera feed as Jake opened his eyes and looked at the rescue team. Instead of showing relief or fear, he smiled at them with a warmth that seemed completely out of place in the dark alien ship. When he spoke, his voice was steady and strong despite his obvious physical condition. "Thank you for coming," Jake said as Stevens helped him to his feet. "I was beginning to think I would be taking a longer trip than I had planned." Lisa felt something strange when she heard his voice. There was a quality to it that reminded her of things she had forgotten long ago. Warmth and kindness and the kind of strength that came from the heart rather than from anger and fear. She pushed those thoughts away and focused on the immediate situation. The away team brought Jake back to the Thunderhawk and took him directly to the medical bay. Dr. Rodriguez examined him thoroughly and reported that while he was suffering from malnutrition and dehydration, his injuries were not life-threatening. Lisa waited until the doctor had finished his work before going to speak with their unexpected guest. Jake was sitting up on the medical bed when Lisa entered the room. He had been given clean clothes and food, but he still looked like a man who had been through a very difficult experience. When he saw her, he smiled again, and Lisa felt that same strange stirring in her chest that she had felt when she first heard his voice. "You must be the captain," Jake said as he stood up to greet her. "I am Jake Running Bear. I cannot tell you how grateful I am to you and your crew for rescuing me." Lisa studied his face as he spoke and tried to understand what made him different from other people she had met. There was something in his eyes that she had never seen before. It was not fear or anger or the cold determination that she saw in her own reflection. It was something warmer and deeper and completely foreign to her experience. "How did you end up on a Zephyrian ship?" Lisa asked in her usual flat tone. Jake's expression grew serious, but he did not show any signs of the trauma that most people displayed after being held prisoner by hostile aliens. "I was captured 5 years ago during a diplomatic mission to the Comanche sector. The Zephyrians have been holding me on one of their research stations ever since." "Research station," Lisa repeated with a slight frown. "What kind of research?" "They wanted to understand what makes humans so difficult to break," Jake said with a slight smile that held no bitterness. "They tried many different approaches, but they never quite figured it out." Lisa felt her jaw tighten as she imagined what he must have endured during 5 years of captivity. She had seen what the Zephyrians did to their prisoners, and most humans who survived that experience came back as broken shells of their former selves. Jake showed no signs of that kind of damage, which made her wonder what kind of man he really was. "How did you escape?" she asked. "I did not escape," Jake said with another smile. "They were moving me to a different facility when their ship was attacked by raiders. The crew abandoned ship and left me locked in the holding area. I managed to get free after the ship lost power and sent out the distress call." Lisa nodded, but she was not entirely convinced by his story. Something about the whole situation felt wrong to her, but she could not put her finger on what it was. Jake seemed too calm and too comfortable for someone who had just escaped from years of captivity and torture. "Dr. Rodriguez says you can return to duty whenever you feel ready," Lisa said. "We will be dropping you off at the next Terran station." "Actually, Captain, I was hoping I might be able to stay aboard your ship for a while," Jake said. "I have information about Zephyrian operations that Fleet Command might find useful." Lisa considered his request and tried to decide whether having him aboard would be an asset or a liability. There was something about Jake Running Bear that made her uncomfortable, but it was not the kind of discomfort that came from danger. It was something else entirely, and she did not like things she could not understand or control. Jake had been aboard the Thunderhawk for 2 weeks when Lisa began to notice changes in her crew. The changes were small at first, but they grew more obvious each day. Her people smiled more often and talked to each other with less fear in their voices. The tension that usually filled the corridors had started to fade away like morning mist under the warmth of the sun. Jake moved through the ship like he belonged there, even though he held no official rank or position. He helped wherever he was needed and spoke to everyone with the same gentle respect that had surprised Lisa during their first meeting. The crew responded to his presence like flowers turning towards sunlight, and Lisa found herself watching him with growing confusion. She discovered him in the ship's small recreation area one evening telling stories to a group of junior officers. They sat around him like children listening to their grandfather, and their faces showed wonder and peace instead of the usual worry that marked the features of people who served aboard warships. Lisa stood in the doorway and listened to his words without letting herself be seen. "My great-grandfather used to tell me that every warrior has 2 wolves fighting inside his heart." Jake said in his calm voice that seemed to carry the wisdom of centuries. One wolf is fear and anger and hatred. The other wolf is love and courage and compassion. The wolf that wins the fight is the one that the warrior chooses to feed. Lieutenant Murphy raised his hand like a student in a classroom. Which wolf did your great-grandfather feed? Jake smiled, and his eyes seemed to look back across the years to memories that brought him joy. He fed both wolves, but he was very careful about when and where he fed each one. He said that a warrior without anger cannot protect what he loves, but a warrior without love has nothing worth protecting. Lisa felt something twist in her chest as she listened to those words. She had spent so many years feeding only one wolf that she had forgotten the other one even existed. The wolf of anger and fear had grown so strong inside her that it had driven away everything else until she was left alone with nothing but the cold satisfaction of victory in battle. The group began to break up as the night shift approached, and Lisa slipped away before anyone could see her. She went to her quarters and tried to focus on the reports that waited on her desk, but Jake's words kept echoing in her mind. She found herself thinking about things she had not allowed herself to remember for years. 3 days later, the Thunderhawk received a priority alert from a civilian transport that was under attack by unknown raiders. Lisa ordered her ship to maximum speed, and they arrived at the coordinates to find a small passenger vessel surrounded by 6 heavily armed fighters. The raiders were firing on the transport's engines to disable it rather than destroy it, which meant they wanted to take prisoners. Battle stations, Lisa ordered as the Thunderhawk dropped out of hyperspace and moved to engage the enemy ships. Target the raiders and prepare to fire. The raiders turned toward them as soon as they appeared on the sensor screens. Lisa recognized their ship designs as belonging to the Crimson Brotherhood, which was one of the most vicious pirate organizations in known space. They were slavers and murderers who attacked civilian ships and sold their prisoners to the highest bidder in the illegal markets of the Outer Rim. Jake appeared on the bridge just as the first enemy shots struck their shields. He was wearing a combat uniform that someone had found for him, and he carried a weapon that Lisa had never seen before. It looked like a combination of human technology and something else that might have been alien in origin. Permission to join the fight, Captain, Jake said as he took position at an empty console. Lisa started to refuse, but something in his eyes made her change her mind. There was no fear there and no uncertainty, only the calm determination of someone who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. She nodded, and Jake's fingers began to move over the controls with the skill of someone who understood both human and alien technology. The battle began in earnest as the Thunderhawk engaged. All 6 enemy ships at once. Lisa had fought against worse odds before, but these raiders were better equipped and more experienced than most pirates. They moved in coordinated patterns, and their weapons were more advanced than anything she had seen pirates use. Before, Jake worked at his station with quiet efficiency, and Lisa gradually realized that he was somehow interfering with the enemy ship's coordination. Their formation began to break apart as their communication systems suffered from mysterious malfunctions, and their targeting computers started to give them false readings. "How are you doing that?" Lisa asked during a brief lull in the fighting. "The Zephyrians taught me many things during my captivity," Jake replied without taking his eyes off his controls. "Most of those lessons were not meant to be gifts, but I chose to treat them as such." Lisa watched him work and began to understand that Jake Running Bear was far more than he appeared to be. He had somehow turned 5 years of torture and imprisonment into an education that made him one of the most dangerous opponents these raiders had ever faced. He was fighting them with their own weapons and using their own tactics against them. The tide of battle turned when Jake managed to take control of one of the raider ships and turn its weapons against its former allies. Lisa used the confusion to press their attack, and within minutes 3 of the enemy ships had been destroyed. The remaining raiders tried to escape, but Jake had disabled their hyperspace engines, and they were trapped in normal space. "This is Captain Lisa Warren of the Terran vessel Thunderhawk." Lisa broadcast on all frequencies. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed." The raiders chose to fight to the death rather than face capture, which was exactly what Lisa had expected. The last 3 ships died under the combined fire of the Thunderhawk's weapons and Jake's electronic warfare systems. When the battle was over, the rescue of the civilian transport was completed, without the loss of a single innocent life. Lisa stood on the bridge after the fighting was over and tried to process what she had just witnessed. Jake had fought with a combination of skill and compassion that she had never seen before. He had been utterly ruthless in dismantling the enemy ships, but he had also worked to minimize casualties and protect the civilians they had come to rescue. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Lisa asked when they were alone in her ready room after the battle. Jake sat across from her desk with the same calm expression he always wore. "My ancestors were warriors long before humans learned to travel between the stars. They taught me that true strength comes from protecting others rather than from destroying enemies." "The Comanche were fierce fighters," Lisa said. "They were feared across the plains for good reason." "Yes, they were fierce, but they were also protectors," Jake replied. "They fought to defend their families and their way of life. They never fought simply for the pleasure of causing pain or because they enjoyed killing." Lisa felt something stir inside her chest again as she listened to his words. She had been fighting for so long that she had forgotten why she had started fighting in the first place. Somewhere along the way, protecting others had become secondary to winning. Battles and winning battles had become more important than protecting life. Jake seemed to read her thoughts without needing to hear her speak them aloud. "You are already a great warrior, Captain Warren. You have the skills and the courage that most people can only dream of having. The only thing you lack is the knowledge of what you are truly fighting for." "I fight for humanity," Lisa said, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Do you fight for humanity, or do you fight against everyone who threatens humanity?" Jake asked gently. "There is a difference between those two things, and that difference changes everything about how you approach each battle." Lisa did not answer his question because she was not sure she knew the answer herself. She had spent so many years focused on destroying her enemies that she had lost sight of what she was trying to protect. Jake's presence on her ship was forcing her to ask questions that she had been avoiding for most of her adult life. The message from Terran High Command arrived on a Tuesday morning when Lisa was reviewing the daily reports from her department heads. Admiral Clark's face appeared on her private communication screen with the stern expression that had made him famous throughout the fleet. Lisa had served under Clark for 8 years, and she knew that expression meant trouble was coming her way. "Captain Warren, you are ordered to proceed immediately to Starbase Omega for transfer of the prisoner, Jake. Running bare to military intelligence," Clark said without any greeting or pleasantries. "This is a Priority 1 directive, and you will comply within 72 hours. Lisa felt her jaw tighten as she listened to the Admiral's words. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped to have more time to prepare for it. Military intelligence was where people went to disappear, and Jake would become another classified file, buried deep in the archives of humanity's secret operations. "Admiral, with respect, Jake Running. Bear is not a prisoner," Lisa said carefully. "He is a rescued Terran citizen who has volunteered to assist with our operations in this sector." Clark's expression grew even colder, if such a thing was possible. "Captain Warren, that man has been in enemy hands for 5 years. He represents a significant security risk and must be properly debriefed before he can be returned to active duty. These orders are not open to discussion or interpretation." Lisa knew better than to argue with a direct order from Fleet Command, but something inside her rebelled against the idea of turning Jake over to the intelligence officers. She had seen what happened to people who were taken for extended debriefing, and most of them never came back the same. The lucky ones were transferred to desk jobs where they could not cause any trouble. The unlucky ones simply vanished. "Understood, Admiral?" Lisa said through teeth that were clenched so tight they hurt. "We will comply with your orders." Clark nodded and cut the communication link without another word. Lisa sat alone in her ready room and stared at the blank screen, while her mind raced through possibilities and consequences. She had never disobeyed a direct order in her entire career, but she had also never felt so strongly about protecting someone before. Jake was in the ship's small garden area when Lisa found him an hour later. He was sitting on a bench surrounded by the green plants that the crew used to remember what home looked like. His eyes were closed and his breathing was slow and steady, as if he was meditating or praying. Lisa stood in the doorway and watched him for several minutes before she found the courage to speak. "We have received new orders," Lisa said as she approached his bench. "Fleet Command wants you transferred to military intelligence for debriefing." Jake opened his eyes and looked at her with the same calm expression he always wore. There was no surprise or fear in his face, even though he must have known what those orders really meant. He simply nodded and smiled at her with the warmth that had become so familiar over the past few weeks. I understand, Captain, Jake said quietly. You must follow your orders. Lisa felt something break inside her chest when she heard the acceptance in his voice. Jake was not angry or bitter about what was going to happen to him. He was not demanding that she protect him or asking her to disobey her superiors. He was simply accepting his fate with the same grace that he had shown throughout his captivity with the Zephyrians. Does it not bother you? Lisa asked as she sat down on the bench beside him. You know what they will do to you in those intelligence facilities. You know that you will never see the stars again. Jake was quiet for a long moment as he considered her question. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had thought deeply about difficult things. My ancestors believed that a man should not fear death if he has lived with honor. I have done my best to live according to their teachings, and I am at peace with whatever comes next. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest like fire climbing up from some deep place she had tried to forget. The anger was not directed at Jake or even at Admiral Clark. It was aimed at a universe that seemed determined to destroy anything good or pure that tried to exist within it. She had spent so many years accepting that universe and its cruelty that she had forgotten how to fight against it. What if there was another way? Lisa said before she could stop herself. What if you did not have to go to that intelligence facility? Jake turned to look at her directly, and she saw something new in his eyes. It was not hope exactly, but it was a recognition that she was offering him something that he had not expected. Captain, you cannot disobey your orders for my sake. I will not allow you to destroy your career to save someone like me, someone like you. Lisa repeated with a harsh laugh that contained no humor. You are the best man I have ever met, Jake Running Bear. You have shown my crew what it means to be human without giving up what it means to be strong. If I cannot protect one good man, then what is the point of having all this power and authority? Jake reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder with the same gentle touch that had calmed her crew over the past few weeks. Lisa felt warmth spread through her body from that simple contact, and she realized that she had not been touched with kindness in more years than she could remember. Her life had been filled with salutes and handshakes and the impersonal contact of military protocol, but nothing like this. Lisa, Jake said, using her first name for the first time since they had met. You have already saved me in ways that you do not understand. Before you found me, I was beginning to lose hope that there were still people in the universe worth protecting. Seeing how you care for your crew and how they look up to you has reminded me why I wanted to return to human space in the first place. Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes, and she blinked them away before they could fall. She had not cried since she was 12 years old, and hiding in the emergency bunkers on New Dakota. Tears were a luxury that warriors could not afford, and she had trained herself to feel nothing rather than risk showing weakness to her enemies. I am not a good person, Jake, Lisa said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. I have done terrible things to protect humanity, and I have enjoyed doing some of those things. I am exactly the kind of person that your ancestors would have warned their children about. Jake's hand moved from her shoulder to her face, and he gently turned her head so that she was looking directly into his eyes. My ancestors would have recognized you as a warrior who has forgotten what she is fighting for. They would have helped you remember that strength without compassion is just another form of weakness. Lisa pulled away from his touch and stood up from the bench. She could not allow herself to be this vulnerable with anyone, no matter how much she trusted them. Vulnerability was a weapon that could be used against her, and she had too many enemies to risk giving them that kind of advantage. The orders stand, Lisa said as she returned to her captain's voice. We will reach Starbase Omega in 48 hours, and you will be transferred as directed. Jake nodded and did not try to argue with her decision. Thank you for everything you have done for me, Lisa. I hope someday you will understand that you are a better person than you believe yourself to be. Lisa left the garden area without responding to his words, but she carried them with her as she returned to the bridge. 48 hours was not much time, but it was enough for her to make a decision that would change everything about her life and her career. She just had to find the courage to make that decision when the time came. Lisa could not sleep during the final night before they reached Starbase Omega. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling while her mind went in circles around the decision that waited for her in the morning. Every logical part of her brain told her to follow orders and transfer Jake to military intelligence as commanded. Every other part of her soul screamed that she would be betraying something precious if she allowed that to happen. She finally gave up trying to rest and made her way to the observation deck where she often went when she needed to think. The large viewing windows showed the stars streaming past as the Thunderhawk moved through hyperspace toward their destination. Lisa had always found peace in watching the endless dance of light and darkness that filled the universe around them. Jake was already there when she arrived. He stood near the main window with his hands clasped behind his back, and his eyes focused on something far beyond the ship. Lisa joined him at the window, and they stood together in comfortable silence for several minutes before either of them spoke. My people believe that each star represents the spirit of a warrior who died protecting something he loved, Jake said without turning away from the view. They watch over us from their place in the sky and guide us when we lose our way in the darkness. Lisa looked up at the countless points of light that surrounded them and tried to imagine what it would feel like to believe in something so beautiful. What do you think they would tell us if they could speak? I think they would remind us that love is the only thing in the universe that makes fighting worthwhile, Jake replied. Without love, we are just animals destroying each other for territory and resources. With love, we become something greater than ourselves. Lisa felt the familiar tightness in her chest when Jake talked about love. The word made her uncomfortable because it represented everything she had given up in order to become the perfect weapon that the fleet needed her to be. Love was weakness, and weakness got people killed in the kind of universe they lived in. I do not know how to love, Lisa said quietly. I gave up that ability a long time ago. Jake turned to look at her with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through all her carefully constructed defenses. You love your crew. I have watched you with them, and I can see how much you care about their safety and their lives. You just do not allow yourself to admit it because you think it makes you vulnerable. It does make me vulnerable, Lisa replied. If I care too much about keeping them alive, then I might hesitate when I need to make the hard decisions. In battle, hesitation equals death. My great-grandfather told me that a warrior who fights only to avoid death will eventually lose to a warrior who fights for something worth living for, Jake said. Fear of loss is not the same thing as courage, and it will never be as strong as the desire to protect what you love. Lisa wanted to argue with him, but she found that she could not find the words to defend her position. Deep down, she knew that Jake was right about her feelings for her crew. She did love them in her own guarded way, and that love had made her a better captain even if she refused to acknowledge it openly. Tell me about your childhood, Jake said as he settled onto a bench near the window. Tell me what made you become the person you are today. Lisa remained standing, but she found herself talking about things she had never shared with anyone before. She told Jake about her parents and how they had died defending New Dakota from alien raiders. She described the 3 months she had spent alone, in the emergency bunkers, eating stale food and drinking recycled water, while she waited for rescue that might never come. I was 12 years old when I realized that the universe does not care about our feelings or our hopes or our dreams, Lisa said as she finished her story. It will take everything away from us unless we are strong enough to fight for what we want to keep. So I decided to become strong enough to protect myself and anyone who chose to stand with me. Jake listened to her words without judgment or pity. When she was finished talking, he was quiet for a long time as he considered what she had told him. You were just a child when you learned that lesson. Children should not have to carry that kind of burden alone. The universe does not care how old we are when it teaches us hard lessons, Lisa replied. I survived because I was willing to learn what it had to teach me. You survived because you were strong and brave and determined to live, Jake said. But survival and living are not the same thing. You have spent so many years just surviving that you have forgotten how to actually live. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest again, but this time it was mixed with something else that might have been pain. Living is a luxury for people who do not have enemies trying to kill them every day. I do not have that luxury. Jake stood up from the bench and moved closer to her until they were standing face to face. Lisa, you have enemies because you choose to see the universe as a place where everything is trying to hurt you. What if there are also things in the universe that are trying to love you? Love is not real, Lisa said, but her voice lacked the conviction that usually carried her words. Love is just a chemical reaction that makes people do stupid things that get them killed. Jake reached out and took her hands in his own. Lisa's first instinct was to pull away, but something in his touch made her freeze in place. His hands were warm and strong and gentle in a way that reminded her of safety and comfort that she had forgotten could exist. If love is not real, then what do you call this feeling between us? Jake asked. What do you call the way your heart speeds up when I touch you, or the way you smile when you think no one is watching? Lisa tried to deny what he was saying, but she found that she could not lie to him or to herself anymore. She did feel something when she looked at Jake Running Bear, and that something was growing stronger every day despite all her efforts to suppress it. It was warm and bright and terrifying in ways that no enemy weapon had ever been. "I'm afraid," Lisa whispered, and the admission felt like jumping off a cliff into an abyss. "I am afraid that if I allow myself to love you, then I will lose you the way I lost everything else that ever mattered to me." Jake pulled her closer until she could feel the warmth of his body and smell the scent of his skin. "Fear of loss is not love, Lisa. Love is choosing to care about someone even when you know that caring might hurt you. Love is deciding that some things are worth the risk of pain." Lisa felt something breaking inside her chest, and for the first time in 20 years, she allowed tears to fall from her eyes. They were tears for her parents and for the child she had been before the universe taught her to be hard. They were tears for all the years she had spent alone and afraid to care about anything beyond duty and survival. Jake held her while she cried and did not try to stop her tears or tell her that everything would be all right. He simply offered his strength and his presence while she finally mourned for everything she had lost and everything she had given up in order to become the Iron Maiden of the stars. When her tears finally stopped, Lisa pulled back and looked into Jake's eyes. She saw love there and acceptance and the kind of strength that came from choosing to be vulnerable despite the risks. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like she was not alone in the universe. "I cannot let them take you," Lisa said, and her voice carried the weight of a decision that would change everything. "I will not hand you over to be destroyed by people who see you as nothing more than a source of information." Jake smiled and touched her face with the same gentle touch that had calmed her crew and healed something broken inside her own heart. "Then we will face whatever comes next together. Just promise me that you will remember what you are fighting for when the time comes to make the hard choices." Lisa nodded and felt something settle into place inside her chest, where the cold emptiness had lived for so many years. She was still afraid, and she was still not sure she knew how to love someone without destroying them, but she was willing to try. Jake Running Bear had shown her that there were things in the universe worth protecting and worth fighting for, and maybe even worth dying for if necessary. Lisa made her decision at exactly 0600 hours ship time when they were still 12 hours away from Starbase. Omega, she called all senior officers to the bridge and stood before them with the kind of calm determination that had carried her through 100 battles. Her crew looked at her with the familiar mixture of respect and fear that had defined their relationship for years, but today something was different. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am about to disobey a direct order from Fleet Command," Lisa announced without any preamble or explanation. "Anyone who wishes to object to my decision or request transfer to another vessel may do so now without prejudice." The bridge fell completely silent as her officers processed what she had just told them. Lieutenant Commander Stevens was the first to speak, and his voice carried the weight of someone who had served under Lisa for 3 years and trusted her judgment completely. "What are your orders, Captain?" Lisa felt something warm spread through her chest when she realized that her crew was willing to follow her, even when she was leading them into unknown danger. They trusted her enough to risk their own careers and possibly their lives because they believed she would not make this choice without good reason. "We are changing course for the frontier zone," Lisa said as she moved to the captain's chair. "Long-range sensors have detected what appears to be a massive Zephyrian fleet moving toward Terran space. Jake Running Bear has information about their capabilities and tactics that could be vital to defending our colonies." Jake stepped forward from where he had been standing near the rear of the bridge. He was wearing a full Terran fleet uniform that had been modified with insignia that identified him as a special advisor. Lisa had made the decision to give him an official position aboard her ship, which meant he was now under her protection as a member of her crew. Captain the Zephyrian fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels, including several ship classes that the Terran fleet has never encountered before, Jake reported in a clear voice that carried throughout the bridge. "They are planning a coordinated attack on 12 human colonies simultaneously, which will stretch our defenses beyond their breaking point." Lisa watched her crew's faces as they absorbed this information. Fear and determination warred in their expressions, but she could see that they understood the magnitude of what they were facing. This was not just another border skirmish or patrol mission. This was potentially the beginning of the final war between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. How do you know this? Chief Engineer Martinez asked. Jake's expression grew serious as he prepared to reveal information that he had been keeping secret since his rescue. The Zephyrians did not capture me by accident 5 years ago. I was sent to infiltrate their research facility as part of a deep-cover intelligence operation. My mission was to learn everything I could about their military capabilities and report back to Fleet Command. Lisa felt a shock run through her system as she realized that Jake had been lying to her about the circumstances of his capture. The hurt lasted only a moment before she understood why he had felt the need to keep his true mission secret. A deep cover agent could not reveal his identity to anyone until his mission was complete. My escape was planned and executed according to protocols that were established before I began my assignment. Jake continued. The Zephyrians believe that I am simply a lucky prisoner who managed to get away during a pirate attack. They do not know that I have been gathering intelligence on their operations for the past 5 years. Stevens leaned forward in his chair as he began to understand the implications of what Jake was telling them. If you are still officially on assignment, then Fleet Command should be expecting your report. Fleet Command believes that I died during my initial capture, Jake said quietly. My handler was killed in the same attack, and there was no way to re-establish contact without compromising my position. As far as the official records are concerned, Jake Running Bear has been missing and presumed dead for 5 years. Lisa felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in her mind as she realized why Admiral Clark had been so eager to get Jake into military intelligence custody. If his true identity became known, it would expose failures in fleet security and intelligence operations that could destroy careers and possibly even bring down the current military leadership. That is why they want to debrief you so badly, Lisa said as understanding dawned. You represent a security liability that they need to control. Jake nodded, and his expression showed the weight of knowledge that he had been carrying alone for years. My intelligence indicates that the Zephyrian attack will begin in less than 72 hours. If we do not warn the colonies and coordinate a proper defense response, then millions of humans will die. Lisa made her second major decision of the day, and this one came even easier than the first. Set course for the Frontier Zone maximum speed. Transmit Jake's intelligence data to all Terran vessels and colonial defense forces in the area. We are going to stop this attack before it can begin. The Thunderhawk changed course and accelerated toward the edge of human space, where the Zephyrian fleet was gathering for their assault. Lisa knew that she was leading her ship and crew into a battle that they probably could not win, but she also knew that running away was not an option. Too many innocent lives depended on them doing everything they could to delay the enemy advance. Jake worked with the ship's communication systems to broadcast warnings and tactical information to every human vessel within range. His knowledge of Zephyrian ship capabilities and battle tactics was incredibly detailed, and Lisa realized that his 5 years of captivity had been the most successful intelligence-gathering operation in human history. 3 hours into their journey toward the Frontier Zone, they received an angry message from Admiral Clark demanding that they return to their assigned course immediately. Lisa listened to his threats and promises of court-martial with the same calm expression that she wore during combat operations. When the message ended, she simply deleted it and continued toward their destination. Captain, we are receiving multiple contacts on long-range sensors, Chen reported from his station. I count 196 Zephyrian vessels in standard attack formation moving toward the Kepler sector. Lisa studied the tactical display and felt her heart sink as she realized the true scope of what they were facing. The Zephyrian fleet was larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever encountered. Even if every available Terran vessel responded to their warning, they would still be outnumbered by more than 2 to 1. Time to intercept, Lisa asked. At current speed, we will reach the enemy fleet in 4 hours and 20 minutes, the navigator reported. The first Terran reinforcements will not arrive for at least 6 hours. Lisa did the calculations in her head and came to the unavoidable conclusion that the Thunderhawk would have to face the Zephyrian advance alone for almost 2 hours before help could arrive. One ship against 200 was not a battle, it was a suicide mission, but it was also the only chance they had to slow down the enemy advance and give the colonies time to prepare their defenses. And this is the captain, Lisa announced over the ship's internal communication system. "In 4 hours we will engage a Zephyrian fleet that outnumbers us by 200 to 1. I will not lie to you about our chances of survival, but I will tell you that what we do today may determine whether human civilization continues to exist." She paused for a moment to let her words sink in before continuing. "Any crew member who wishes to leave the ship when we reach the edge of the battle zone will be transported to the nearest safe location with no questions asked and no mark on their record. This is not their fight, and I will not force anyone to die for my decisions." Lisa waited for responses, but none came. Her crew had made their choice, and they were going to stand with their captain no matter what the cost. She felt pride and love and gratitude wash over her, as she realized that she was not facing this impossible battle alone. Jake had been right about love making people stronger instead of weaker. The Thunderhawk dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian fleet formation and immediately came under fire from dozens of enemy vessels. Lisa had positioned her ship near a cluster of asteroids that would provide some cover while they executed their attack plan. The enemy fleet was so large that it took up most of the space visible through the main viewing screen. "All weapons free," Lisa ordered as the first enemy shot struck their shields. "Target their command vessels and ignore the escorts." Jake had identified 3 massive ships at the center of the Zephyrian formation that served as command and control nodes for the entire fleet. If they could disable or destroy those vessels, the rest of the fleet would lose coordination and become much easier for the arriving Terran forces to handle. The plan was simple, but executing it would require them to fight their way through layers of enemy defenders. The Thunderhawk moved through the asteroid field like a hunting cat stalking its prey. Lisa used every trick she had learned in 20 years of combat to keep her ship alive, while Jake worked his electronic warfare magic on the enemy communication systems. The combination of her tactical skills and his technical knowledge proved devastatingly effective against the overconfident Zephyrians. "Enemy command ship, bearing 27 Mark V, Chen reported as they broke through the first line of defenders. "Range 12,000 kilometers and closing." Lisa could see the massive Zephyrian vessel through the viewing screen. It was easily 3 times the size of the Thunderhawk, and bristled with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Under normal circumstances, attacking such a ship would be suicide. But these were not normal circumstances, and Lisa was no longer fighting just to survive. "Jake, I need you to get me access to that ship's internal systems," Lisa said as she maneuvered around a spread of enemy torpedoes. "Can you do it?" Jake's fingers flew over his console as he worked to penetrate the enemy ship's defenses. "I can give you a window of approximately 30 seconds when their shields and weapons will be offline. After that, they will adapt to my intrusion methods and lock me out." Lisa nodded and began to position the Thunderhawk for a direct assault on the command vessel. She would have one chance to inflict maximum damage, and she could not afford to waste it. The lives of millions of humans depended on what happened in the next few minutes. "All power to forward weapons," Lisa ordered. "Prepare for ramming speed." Her crew looked at her with expressions of shock and understanding. They realized that she was planning to ram the enemy command ship in a final desperate attack that would almost certainly destroy both vessels. It was the kind of tactic that had made humans famous throughout the galaxy for their willingness to sacrifice everything in order to achieve victory. Jake suddenly stood up from his console and moved to stand beside Lisa's command chair. "There is another way, Captain. I can get aboard that ship and disable their systems from the inside while you coordinate the attack from out here." Lisa felt her heart stop as she realized what Jake was suggesting. "That is a suicide mission. Even if you manage to get aboard that ship, you will never make it back out alive." "Maybe not, but I have a better chance of surviving than this entire crew does if we ram that ship," Jake replied calmly. "Besides, my ancestors always said that a warrior should choose how he dies, and I would rather die protecting the woman I love than hiding behind her strength." Lisa wanted to refuse his request, but she knew that he was right about their chances. Ramming the enemy command ship would definitely destroy it, but it would also kill everyone aboard the Thunderhawk. Jake's plan offered at least some hope that most of her crew could survive to fight another day. "How will you get aboard?" Lisa asked, even though she was afraid to hear the answer. Jake smiled and pulled out a small device that she had never seen before. "Zephyrian personal transport technology. I took this from the ship where you found me, and I have been modifying it for the past few weeks. It should be able to get me through their shields and onto their bridge." Lisa looked into his eyes and saw the same calm determination that had attracted her to him from the beginning. Jake Running Bear was not afraid to die, but he was also not giving up hope of living. He was simply choosing to do what needed to be done regardless of the personal cost. "I cannot ask you to do this," Lisa said quietly. "You are not asking," Jake replied. "I am volunteering because this is what I choose to do with my life. My people believe that every man must find his own path to honor, and this is mine." Lisa stood up from her command chair and moved close enough to touch Jake's face with her hand. Around them, the bridge continued to shake from enemy weapons fire, but for a moment they were alone together in their own private universe. She had found love just in time to lose it again, but she refused to let that knowledge make her bitter. "Promise me something," Lisa said as she looked into his dark eyes. "Promise me that you will try to come back to me." Jake leaned forward and kissed her with a gentleness that made her remember what it felt like to be cherished and protected. When he pulled away, his smile held all the warmth and love that had been missing from her life for so many years. "I promise that I will do everything I can to return to you," Jake said. "But if I do not make it back, then promise me that you will remember what we talked about in the observation deck. Promise me that you will keep fighting for love instead of fighting against fear." Lisa nodded and stepped back to let him prepare for his mission. She watched him check his equipment and activate the transport device while her heart broke and mended itself at the same time. Jake Running Bear had taught her how to love, and now he was about to show her what love really meant. "Transport in 3, 2, 1, Jake said, and then he vanished in a swirl of alien energy that carried him across the void between ships. Lisa returned to her command chair and tried to focus on the tactical situation, even though part of her mind was following Jake through the corridors of the enemy vessel. She could see him in her imagination moving through the ship like a ghost, while Zephyrian security forces tried to hunt him down. He was alone on a hostile ship surrounded by enemies who wanted to kill him, but he was also exactly where he needed to be. "Captain, I am reading massive system failures aboard the enemy command ship," Chen reported with excitement in his voice. "Their weapons are offline and their shields are fluctuating." Lisa felt hope rise in her chest as she realized that Jake had succeeded in reaching the enemy ship's critical systems. Now it was up to her to take advantage of the opportunity he had created. She ordered all weapons to target the command vessel and watched as the Thunderhawks' guns spoke with voices of thunder and lightning. The enemy ship's hull cracked and split under the concentrated fire from the Thunderhawks' weapons. Internal explosions lit up the massive vessel from within as Jake's sabotage work continued to spread through their systems like a virus. Within minutes, the once mighty command ship was nothing more than a drifting hulk that posed no threat to anyone. "Jake, respond, please," Lisa called over the communication system, but there was no answer from the dying enemy vessel. Lisa stared at the wreckage of the command ship and tried to accept that the man she loved might be dead. Around her, the battle continued as more Terran vessels arrived to engage the confused and leaderless Zephyrian fleet, but she found it difficult to care about anything except the silence that came from Jake's communication device. Lisa watched the scanner displays with growing desperation as the minutes ticked by, without any sign of life from the destroyed Zephyrian command ship. The battle around them was turning in humanity's favor as more Terran vessels arrived and took advantage of the confusion that Jake's sabotage had created in the enemy fleet. Without their command structure, the Zephyrians were fighting as individual ships, rather than as a coordinated force. "Captain, I am detecting a faint transponder signal from the wreckage of the command vessel," Chen suddenly called out from his sensor station. "It appears to be coming from an escape pod." Lisa felt her heart leap as she realized that Jake might still be alive. She ordered the Thunderhawk to move toward the source of the signal, while continuing to fight off the remaining Zephyrian attackers. The escape pod was small and badly damaged, but it was intact and showed signs of life support activity. "Tractor beam lock achieved," Stevens reported. "Bringing the pod aboard now." Lisa wanted to run to the shuttle bay to meet the rescue pod, but her duty as captain kept her on the bridge until the immediate battle was over. The last of the Zephyrian ships in their sector had been destroyed or driven off by the growing Terran fleet, and the immediate threat to the colonies had been eliminated. Only then did she allow herself to leave her post and race toward the shuttle bay. Jake was unconscious when the medical team pulled him from the damaged escape pod, but Dr. Rodriguez quickly determined that his injuries were not life-threatening. He had suffered from smoke inhalation and several minor burns, but he was alive, and his vital signs were stable. Lisa stood beside his medical bed and held his hand while the doctor worked to treat his injuries. He should regain consciousness within the next few hours, Rodriguez reported. He is going to be fine, Captain. Lisa felt tears of relief run down her face as she realized that she had not lost the man she loved after all. Jake had kept his promise to try to return to her, and she intended to keep her promise to remember what they had talked about on the observation deck. She was going to learn how to fight for love instead of fighting against fear. Jake opened his eyes 6 hours later and smiled when he saw Lisa sitting beside his bed. His voice was hoarse from the smoke he had inhaled, but his words were clear and strong when he spoke to her. "Did we win?" Jake asked. "We won," Lisa replied as she squeezed his hand. "The Zephyrian fleet has been scattered and the colonies are safe. You saved millions of lives today." Jake tried to sit up, but Lisa gently pushed him back down onto the medical bed. "We saved millions of lives. I could not have done any of that without you and your crew supporting me." Lisa leaned forward and kissed him with all the love and gratitude that had been building up inside her heart. When she pulled away, she saw the same warmth and acceptance in his eyes that had first attracted her to him weeks ago on the damaged alien ship. "What happens now?" Jake asked as he looked into her eyes. Lisa had been thinking about that question ever since she had made the decision to disobey Admiral Clark's orders. Her career in the Terran fleet was probably over, and she would likely face court-martial for her actions. But she had also become a hero by preventing the Zephyrian attack, and heroes were sometimes given more forgiveness than ordinary officers. "Now we face the consequences of our choices," Lisa said. "Fleet Command is not going to be happy about our disobedience, but they are going to have a hard time punishing the people who saved human civilization." 3 weeks later, Lisa stood in the courtroom on Earth where her court-martial was being held. Admiral Clark had pressed charges against her for disobedience, mutiny, and endangering her crew, but the proceedings had not gone the way he had expected. Jake's intelligence about the Zephyrian attack had been verified by multiple sources, and the successful defense of the colonies had made Lisa a celebrity. Throughout human space, the military tribunal found her guilty of disobeying orders but recommended clemency in light of the exceptional circumstances and the positive outcome of her actions. Instead of being cashiered from the service, Lisa was promoted to the rank of Commodore and given command of a new task force that would be responsible for defending the frontier regions. Jake was officially restored to active duty with the rank of commander and assigned as Lisa's intelligence advisor. His cover story as a former prisoner was maintained to protect the secrecy of his real mission, but everyone who mattered knew the truth about his 5 years of service behind enemy lines. 6 months after the battle, Lisa stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the UES New Dawn, and watched as her task force prepared to depart for their first mission in the unexplored regions beyond the frontier. The ship was larger and more advanced than the Thunderhawk, but it felt like home because Jake was standing beside her and her crew trusted her leadership. "Ready to depart, Commodore," Jake reported from his position at the intelligence station that had been specially designed for his unique skills. Lisa looked around the bridge at the faces of her officers and saw confidence and determination instead of the fear that had marked her previous commands. She had learned to lead with love as well as strength, and her people responded to that combination with loyalty that went far beyond mere duty. "Take us out," Lisa ordered as the New Dawn moved away from Earth and toward the stars that beckoned from the darkness. The ship accelerated smoothly as it headed toward the hyperspace jump point that would carry them to their new area of operations. Lisa and Jake stood together on the bridge and watched the stars grow brighter as they left the safety of human space behind them. They were heading toward unknown dangers and uncertain futures, but they were facing those challenges together. "What do you think we will find out there?" Lisa asked as they approached the jump point. Jake smiled and took her hand in his as they prepared to enter hyperspace. "I think we will find exactly what we are looking for." "And what is that? A chance to protect something worth protecting and love something worth loving," Jake replied. "A chance to show the universe that humans can be more than just fierce warriors." Lisa nodded and felt the familiar warmth spread through her chest as the New Dawn jumped into hyperspace and carried them toward their destiny. She was still the fierce warrior who had earned the name Iron Maiden, but she was also something more now. She was a woman who had learned to balance strength with compassion and courage with love. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and dimmer, until it was just another star in the vast ocean of light that surrounded them. Ahead lay adventures and dangers and opportunities to prove that humanity had evolved beyond its reputation as the violent species. Lisa and Jake would face those challenges as partners and equals, united by love and bound by their commitment to protecting the innocent. The new dawn disappeared into the swirling colors of hyperspace, carrying its crew toward a future that was bright with possibility. In the captain's ready room, Lisa and Jake had hung a picture of the night sky as seen from New Dakota, with all its countless stars shining like the spirits of warriors who had found something worth fighting for. Every time they looked at that picture, they remembered that love was the strongest force in the universe, and that together they could face any enemy that dared to threaten the things they held dear.